everyone. So I talk about luxury, as you know, but I also like to discuss more topical things in relation to luxury, and I thought, given everything that's going on in the world right now would be a good time to have a general chat and kind of like a think with you all and discuss it with you all in the comments about the impact of everything that's going on globally on the luxury industry. Will it be impacted? In the short and in the long term, what do things look like for it? You know, these brands, they're raising their prices, but at the same time, you've got the cost of living crisis. You've got the cost of oil per barrel is now like $100 or something crazy. And if no one gets on top of that within a couple of months, that's going to have a spiral effect. Soaring inflation, we've just had the pandemic. And all of these things together are a dangerous catalyst for pulling into poverty those who weren't in it originally. All of these things could really easily drag more people into poverty, and it's a really scary state of affairs. But how do these issues affect the luxury industry? For this, what I've done is I've gone back over and I've looked at previous recessions, and I've also looked at periods in times in the past. For example, I think it was the early 80s where inflation got really high, I think 16% from what I can remember. And I've looked at how the luxury industry, not just handbags, cars, yachts, watches, fine jewellery, fashion, I've looked at how all of those industries fared through those periods of time. And what I've noticed, before going into more detail, is that luxury seems to be impervious in a way to things like this happening. It's not to say that it isn't affected at all, because it is, but it's not affected to the degree that some other industries are, where you might see companies going into administration. The luxury sector doesn't seem to have to take that sort of a hit, which I think is quite interesting. And my thoughts on it are that luxury still attracts the elite, it still attracts those who can afford it, regardless of a recession or not. Not only that, but even in a recession, particularly in a recession, although there will be those of us who become a lot more conservative with our spending, there is also an element of, how many of you remember this from 2020? Online sales went through the roof when we were all locked in. But then when we were all set free again, sales on the high street went through the roof, and there was this real flip effect. And actually, to a degree, high street sales pre-COVID were never really that strong. You could go to the high street and it would be pretty empty because everyone's at home doing it online. Suddenly you go to the shops and it would be really busy. The EU, the US and the UK banned exports of luxury goods into Russia, and it was done in a view to trying to combat the elite who would be buying that kind of thing. And you know, when I'm talking about luxury, I am actually talking about cars, watches, fashion, not just handbags. On top of that, you had loads of brands pull out from Russia. You had the LVMH group, you had Chanel, you even had places like Uniqlo that pulled out, and all of those things together have contributed to where we are now. And luxury, although it's frivolous and unnecessary, it plays such a big part. It's such a large industry. So in the short term, do I think that luxury will be dented at all? I think in the shorter term, yes, but I don't think by much. If you look at these brands, it seems like a crazy time that they should be putting up their prices, particularly putting up their prices by the massive percentages for which they are. It would make you think, who's buying this stuff? You know, groceries have got more expensive, heating the home's got more expensive, filling up my car's got more expensive. Who is it that's got these thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds just rolling around that can go and walk in and buy this kind of thing and not have to plan and think about heating their home next week? You know, even I, for example, have become a lot more reined in with how much I'm spending, because I'm very aware of the future. And I got my first job during the credit crunch, and that was a really, really difficult time, and it went on years, and that scared me. That credit crunch really scared me because it was so tough, and I had my salary cut by 30%. Inflation meant that everything got really expensive. I couldn't like, let's say previously I could fill up my car for £40, suddenly it was like 50 or £60, I couldn't afford to do it. Buying food, everything got super expensive. I remember what it's like, and so I'm thinking right now, button down the hatches. David says I worry too much, but that's how I feel. Pretty much, I think the only people that are going to be impacted are those of us who are the aspirational buyer, those of us who might buy one bag a year, those of us who are saving hard to be able to afford that one bag. Those who I don't think will be affected are the elites, those people that money isn't an issue, and certainly the kind of money they'd have to outlay to buy a bag is like a nothing. But I found a really interesting quote, and it's by someone called Marie Driscoll. She works as managing director for the luxury and retail at the Coresight Research Group. What she's saying here is something that I agree with, and it's something that when I read it, after I was kind of thinking all of this in my head, I thought I couldn't have said it better. So here we go. She said, for the near term, luxury is going to take a hit, as is everything. We came into this year before we were concerned about the Ukraine. We were worried about inflation, how that was impacting the consumer generally. Luxury brands are raising their prices are being raised across the board, and now you have this whammo effect of $100 oil, perhaps for 3 or 4 months, perhaps longer. If this doesn't resolve itself within a month or two, I think that the growth we projected coming into this year is going to be muted. So that's one expert who isn't painting a doom and gloom picture for the future, but she's saying that in the short term it's going to be impacted. There's also another really good quote here by Omar Saad, who has said, he's a consumer and luxury analyst at Evercore ISI, and he has said, European local spending, that's probably going to be a little bit shakier nearer term because it's so much closer to home there. So what he's talking about in this larger article, he was talking about the effect of the war and how in Europe, because we're much closer to it, the impact of it is greater on us than it is in more faraway countries in the world, for example, particularly as well because, you know, we're getting our gas and electricity through from Russia. It affects us more. So when it comes to Europeans, us in Europe are going to possibly be spending less, certainly in the short term. He does say though, he mentioned that if the war becomes drawn out over time, any hesitancy in the market will become more of a blip. I think it's too many degrees of separation to have a meaningful impact. If you look at the direct business of companies that we cover, whether it's luxury firms or sports companies like Adidas or Nike, the actual direct exposure to Ukraine and Russia is less than 5% and really closer to 2 or 3% at the most. If we look at the longer term, if you take China, for example, China is one of the biggest consumer countries, particularly for luxury. Don't know whether you know this, but per person in China who buys luxury, they per head spend more on luxury individually than anyone in any other country globally. For example, if you go back to 2021, they were said to have spent $74 billion on luxury goods. And a lot of this as well is said to have happened during lockdowns that they had, where I guess to a degree people were trying to make themselves feel better. They would, you know, spoil yourself, you're locked in. You can't wear the bag anywhere, but you know, it makes you feel good to know it's coming to you in the post. But the luxury industry is resilient. There are always those that are going to go and spend the money on it. And I think in the short term, they're going to be knocked by, particularly by those of us who are like, oh, I don't want to spend that money just yet. I want to see how things go. But then in the longer term, I think it will pick back up for them. The discussion moderator, Khan, also challenged the notion that luxury goods businesses would see any adverse effects because during the pandemic, when economic stresses were much more widespread, people still spent plenty on luxuries. In fact, LVMH, Richemont and Kering all posted record results in the midst of global misery. That says it all. Do you remember the images we were seeing in the news of queues around the block to Hermes, to Chanel, queues from China to the UK, to the US, to Australia, to all of these luxury boutiques where suddenly everyone was allowed out of the house, and the first thing a lot of people did was they rushed to go and buy some luxury fashion. But for now, the long-term prognosis, especially for the iconic luxury fashion brands, is positive. The industry is resilient. They've weathered 3 centuries of wars, depressions and recessions. They'll overcome this, Khan said. Luxury is one of the safer long-term bets. And that's what I mean. Through everything that's happened in the past, recessions, depressions, inflation rates going through the roof, the luxury industry has stayed buoyant. It's kept its head above the water. And in many cases, sometimes, for some reason, doesn't get affected at all. I can't see price rises stopping or slowing down. How much of that is driven by the world current affairs, I'm not sure. And how much of it's driven basically by everything that's going on in the world, and how much is driven by the brands trying to claw back lost money. Well, that's a really difficult one to say, and I don't have the answer to that. I don't know why the prices are going up so quickly and so fast. I have no clue. If any of you know, please let me know. I did at one point have a theory that it was to do with the fact that there was supply chain issues and stores were closed down during COVID, but that was 2 years ago now. So with the price rises that they've had, you would have thought that they probably would nearly be breaking even on that now, yet the price rises are still happening. I think there is also, totally separate to this, an element of exclusivity, of brands trying to be more exclusive, of brands trying to price more people out. Let me know what you think of this whole thing. Do you think that luxury will suffer? Do you think that it won't? How has the world current affairs affected you in the way you spend? Are you spending less right now? Or can you see yourself actually sadly getting used to everything that's going on, and then your spending goes back to somewhere near what you're used to? Let me know. I would love to hear. I'm so interested in this topic. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.